Welcome to part 4 of my n8n Masterclass series, where I take you from a complete beginner who's never stepped inside n8n to someone who's able to confidently build these solutions either for yourself or for others. So if you're brand new to the no-code AI space, then I highly recommend that you go and check out parts 1 to 3 first. However, if you're a little bit more advanced and you want to jump right in here, then that is absolutely fine. So a quick recap on part 3, we covered the idea of HTTP requests, and I explained why it's the most powerful node inside of n8n because it allows us to connect to apps and services which aren't native inside of the platform, which in the real world is extremely important. We then hooked up our HTTP request to Tavily, and the reason we chose Tavily was because 1, it's free for the first 1,000 credits, so we can make requests without it costing us any money. 2, they've got excellent documentation which guides us through things in extreme detail. And 3, they have an API playground which allows us to actually see what's going on behind the scenes when we alter our query. Now, we also imported using curl, and I explained that that's the first thing that you should always be looking for in the documentation is look for curl. If you can't find it, then give the documentation to AI and have it help you configure the node properly. So then at the end of the lesson, I introduced the concept of webhooks. Now, that is what we're going to be diving into in this lesson in much more detail, and we're actually going to be hooking our agent up to Telegram so that we can get outside of n8n, because this isn't ideal in reality. We don't want to be inside of n8n talking to our agent via the n8n chat window, so that is what we're going to be doing today. So what are webhooks and why should you care? Well, a webhook is a type of trigger, and a trigger is what starts our workflow off. Every workflow needs a trigger, and no workflow can start without one. So a webhook allows us to trigger our n8n workflow based on an external event which happens outside of n8n. I use the analogy of your workflow having a phone number which we can give to a third-party app or service, and we can tell them to call us when that event that we want to be notified about occurs. So why does this matter? Well, what if we wanted our n8n workflow to trigger when a form is submitted on our website or a new lead is added to our CRM? These are real-world applications of when you would need to use webhooks. In our case, what if we wanted to be talking to our AI agent, but we didn't want to be stuck inside of the n8n chat, which is what we just talked about, right? So webhooks are essential when you're building real agents and automations either for yourself or for clients in the real world, because nobody wants to be inside of n8n's chat window. Here are some popular use cases for when you might need to use webhooks. So we have voice agents, sales workflows, research workflows, and RAG agents, right? If we want to build any sort of n8n automation which runs in real time, then the workflow must start with a webhook. And I've put some examples here. We've got Telegram, Slack, form submission, or the bog standard webhook node, right? So let's jump back into n8n where we're going to be hooking up Telegram to our AI agent. We're back inside of n8n, and I want you to open up the node panel and type in Telegram. Click on that, and you're going to see all of the different actions which we can take within Telegram. But I want you to scroll all the way down to the very bottom, and you're going to see triggers. So click on that. You can see this now, triggers down here. And I want you to go to on message, because that is what we want. We want our workflow to trigger on a message. So click on that. And now you're going to see this, which you should now be familiar with. You've got your webhook URLs up the top. There's a test one and a production one, just the same as we have with the kind of boilerplate webhook node from n8n. Now we've got this again here, credential to connect with. So we've been through this a few times now. What do? We go to create new credential, and if we're not sure what to do, we always go to the documentation. So click open docs, and you're going to see here n8n's documentation on how we can actually get our token which we need for our bot. So you can use these credentials to authenticate the following nodes: Telegram and Telegram trigger, or we're after a Telegram trigger. Prerequisites: you need to have a Telegram account, so I would imagine most of you do. If you don't have one, then go and create a Telegram account. It's completely free. And now if we scroll down where it says using API bot access token, to configure this credential you'll need a bot access token. So to generate your access token, start a chat with the bot father. So that's what we're going to do right now. So head over to Telegram and we're going to create our bot. So in the search bar on the left, I want you to type in bot father, and you should see this one come up with the blue tick. So click on that, and then down the bottom you're going to hit start. From there you're going to get a list of different instructions here. Now what we're worrying about is creating a new bot. So we're going to do / new bot, enter that, and it's asking us for a name. So I'm just going to call mine n8n Masterclass bot. Good. Now let's choose a username. So it must end in bot like this, for example, Tetris bot or Tetris _bot. So this is your actual username for your bot. Now you need to pick something which hasn't already been chosen by somebody else. So if you do end up picking something, you might need to change it. So I'm going to do n8n Masterclass bot and see if that's been taken. So n8n Masterclass part 4 bot. Congratulations on your new bot. You will find it blah 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 blah. What you need to worry about here is use this token to access the HTTP API. So I want you to copy this code here, right? And that's what we need to give to n8n. Now, I've run through this quite quickly, and you might be thinking, if I wasn't following along with the video, how would I know? Well, the answer is in the documentation. This is what it's telling you to do all through here, right? You can see part number 4, copy the bot token the bot father generates and add it to the access token in n8n. So that's what we're going to do. So come back in here, access token, paste it in. If you want to see it, you can hit expression. I'm going to keep mine hidden, and then we're going to hit save. Now it says credentials successfully created inside your personal workspace. So that is all working nicely. You can see we're now connected. So what do we need to do now? Well, come out of here. We've got our Telegram trigger. So I want you to disconnect the chat trigger node from your AI agent. So we'll disconnect that. If you missed that, we do it by hitting the little trash can. We can drag this out the way. And then you can click into the node, not actually into the node settings, but just click on the node so it's highlighted. And if you press D on your keyboard, that is going to deactivate that node, right? So let's deactivate that for now. I'm going to get rid of this webhook out of the way. And I'm going to connect up our Telegram trigger to our AI agent. Head back over to Telegram, and I want you to find your bot, and then once you find it, click into it and hit start. Now I want you to go back over to n8n, click into your Telegram trigger, and I want you to hit pull in events from Telegram execute step. Okay, now what you can see here, right, is a whole heap of stuff. Now if we go on again, we've run through this before, you have 3 different ways you can view your data: schema, table, and JSON. I would recommend that you start trying to get comfortable with viewing things in JSON format. I know that when you're first starting out, you might feel more comfortable using either table or schema, but I would suggest trying to get used to JSON. And it's the same data, it's just a different way of viewing it. But you can see everything's exactly the same. But when you start dealing with more advanced API calls, this is how your data is going to get returned in JSON format. So try and get comfortable with this. But what do we care about here? Well, we can see the first name, last name, that's my name. You can see the ID. You can see lots of different things. So you can see here where it says text start. So that's what we said. If we go back to Telegram, we said start. So what I want you to do now is say hello. Right? We're going to hit execute step. And you can see this where it says hello. So what we need to do is, when we were dealing with the n8n chat trigger, it automatically populated that our message was going straight into our AI agent, and that was the input. Remember, if you go into your agent, it says connected chat trigger node, and you notice now this has gone red. The prompt, the user message, which is our input, that has gone red because we're not using the n8n chat trigger anymore. So we need to update that. So what you need to do is, in this drop down where it says connected chat trigger node, click into that, and I want you to click on define below. And now you can see all of a sudden that we can hard code a value in here, or we can use mapped data. Now we covered the idea of variables in a previous lesson, but we didn't go into too much detail about it. I just said that a variable is what you would use when the data is going to change every time that you actually use your AI agent. So let's dive into that a little bit more. Everything you see here on the left hand side is all of the data that's been pulled into our AI agent from Telegram. This is the input. All of the data which is flowing into our AI agent from Telegram is this here. And I want you to think about all of this data as one package. So everything inside these brackets here, I want you to think about that as being one package. So what do we care about in this lot of data? Well, we care about this, hello, the text, because that is what our message said, right? That is, if we go back to Telegram, what did I say? I said hello. So that is what we need to grab. So how do we tell n8n which part of that package it needs to grab. We need to tell it what to look for. And the way that we do that is with mapped data. So we're going to grab this text and we're going to drag that into the prompt, user message. And you're going to see now it says curly bracket, $JSON.message.text, curly bracket, and underneath you can see it says hello. So what does this JSON.message.text actually mean? Well, that is just us telling n8n which part of the package it needs to look for. Every time we get a new message coming into our AI agent from Telegram, the data is always going to be structured in this manner. So what we need to do is just tell n8n what it is that it needs to grab, and we do that with this. Now, luckily for you, you don't need to populate this. All you need to do is drag what it is that you're looking for into the box. So let's say it wasn't text. Now, it's going to be for us, but let's say we wanted to grab this ID. Then we'll just pull that in. And you can see it's different this time. It now says json.message.chat.id. And you've seen the value. So all you need to worry about is look through the input, whatever it is you're interested in, grab it and pull it in there. And now every time we message our AI agent, it's going to look for whatever this text variable is in the input, and it's going to pull that in, and that is going to be what it uses as its input or the user's prompt. So that's a really important concept to understand, because when you start building things out for yourself, you're going to be using these variables a lot more often, especially if you're dealing with any sort of automation. Then variables are key to making sure that you're pulling in the right data at the right time within the automation sequence. So the only time you'll be using connected chat trigger node is if you're using n8n's native chat window. If you're using anything else, you need to use define below, look through the input, and drag in what it is that you're after. Now there's one more thing that I wanted to cover, because if you remember back, I said that our workflow has a phone number, and we talked about these URLs and how these are effectively the phone number which we can give to our third-party app or service, and we can say, call us when desired event happens, okay? For us, that's a message to our bot in Telegram. Now, they make it nice and easy for us because we don't need to configure that with Telegram. But for many different third-party apps and services, you do need to configure that. And the way that you would do that is you come to your Webhook URL, you copy the URL, and I'm going to use Slack for this example. You would go over to Slack, you would find where it says request URL, and you would paste that in there. And how would you know to do that? Well, you would go to the documentation, right? If I quickly go to Slack, scroll down, find a trigger, message, that'll do. You can see URLs up the top. So if we go to create new credential, open docs, scroll down, it'll walk you through it step by step. You can see here, in n8n, copy the Webhook URL and enter it in as the request URL in your Slack app. So it will guide you through that in the documentation, and that is how you would know what to do. I just wanted to highlight that because if you're trying to use something other than Telegram and it's not working, then that will be why. You need to give the URL to your third-party app or service, whereas with Telegram, that is not something which you have to do. So when you're dealing with webhooks, they will only work if your workflow is published. If you remember back to part 1, when we did a quick tour of the n8n UI, I talked about this publish button, and that is effectively turning your workflow on and off. So any sort of webhook will not work if your workflow is not live. So what I'm going to do is we're going to get rid of this webhook here, and I'm going to get rid of this chat. I'm going to pull that out of the way for now. So we're going to hit save, and we're going to publish our workflow. Now you can give it a version name, and you can describe changes that is new with n8n's version 2, but we're not going to bother with that, so we're just going to hit publish. Say that's fine, got it. And we're going to head back to Telegram, and we're going to give it a message. So I'm going to say, can you tell me about the latest AI news? Let's see what happens. So if we go back over to n8n, we can go to executions, and you can see that we've got an error. So let's figure out what went wrong here. So we've got an error from the simple memory subnode. So if I click on this, you can see here it says session key from previous node, json.session_id, no session ID found, expected to find the session ID in an input called session ID. This is what the chat trigger node outputs. To use something else, change the session ID parameter. You can see there's some other error details here. So what went wrong? Well, we updated our trigger from connected chat trigger node to this Telegram trigger. We updated our user message for the prompt for our AI agent, but we didn't update the simple memory. So this is the session ID so that it knows all of the messages that it needs to remember. It's the messages from the current session which it's remembering. So we also need to update that, right? Because this no longer exists. So I'm glad that didn't work, and I'm glad I forgot to do that, because it shows you how we can go about actually solving things when things do go wrong. We come into the executions, we find out what went wrong. We can see here the issue was with memory. We can open the node. We can see the errors. If you're not sure about what it is, if you didn't know what this meant, you would just take this, take it over to Claude or Gemini or whichever LLM you use, give it screenshots, and it will guide you through how to fix that issue. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to editor. So we'll head back into simple memory, and we need to change this from connected chat trigger node to define below. Just the exact same process as we did for the user prompt. So we're going to click on that, and now we need to drag a variable from the input into here. So what is that? Well, we're looking for a chat ID. So there are a couple of different IDs here: update ID, message ID. But what we're looking for is the chat ID. And if you didn't know, then all you would do is you would take a screenshot of this, you'd take it over to your LLM of choice, and again, just go back and forth with the AI. It will tell you what you need to do. But I've done this before with Telegram, so I know that what I need is the chat ID. So I'm going to grab this, and I'm going to pull that in there. And you can see it now says Telegram trigger.item.json message chat ID. And we've got the result underneath. So that's now working as it should, or it's green anyway. So let's test it out. So let's head back over to Telegram and see if that is now working. So I'm going to say, can you tell me about how AI is going to affect the finance industry by 2030? So I'm going to send that off, and we're going to go back into n8n. Now, what's changed here is you're no longer going to be able to see your live execution in the editor panel, and the reason for that is because your workflow is now published. So you need to go into the executions tab to be able to see what happened. So let's head in there, and you can see now succeeded in 6.684 seconds, and we can see exactly what went on. So Telegram trigger, it's gone into our AI agent, it's hit the chat model, it's hit memory, and it's hit Tavily. So everything's worked there as it should. Now, if we head back to Telegram, you notice that we haven't got response. So why is that? Well, when you're using n8n's connected chat trigger node, it automatically populates the response in the chat window. But if you're using a webhook, that doesn't happen. So we need to add an output to our AI agent so that we can receive that message back in Telegram or whatever it is that you're connected to. It could be Slack, it could be anything. So let's do that just now. So what I want you to do is come back to editor, and we need to add an output. This is your input on the left, and this is your output on the right. So click on the add button here, type in Telegram, and again you can see all of the different actions which we can take with using Telegram, but this time we don't need a trigger, okay? Because we're not starting the workflow. So what we need this time is an action. So what we're looking for is message actions, and we're looking for send a message. So let's have a look. Send a text message. So click on that, and I want you to click out of there. I'm just going to move these down a little bit. There we go. So we need to configure this output now. Now what I want you to do is, this is a good time to talk about pinned data. So what is pinned data? Well, pinned data allows us to use the data from a previous execution and pull that back into the editor so that we can see what's going on. Now, it also allows us to debug things. So if we had an error, we can pin the data from a previous execution, pull that data live back into the editor, and rerun it without running that node again. So when is that useful? Well, if you've got a really big agent or automation, you might be using expensive APIs, you could be generating pictures or even videos. Now, if you've already done that little part, you don't want to have to do it again if something downstream of that wasn't working, especially when you're using expensive APIs. So what we can do is we can pin the data, and the workflow is going to use the data from a previous execution so that it doesn't fire for that node again. So it might make a little bit more sense when I show it to you. So go back to executions here, and in your latest execution, which we just did, up in the top right, you're going to see this copy to editor. So I want you to click on copy to editor, and you can now see how we've got a little pin here on the trigger, and all of this has gone back to green. So there's two ways that you can pin data. You can either click into your node, and up on the output, which is always on the right, you can either click on the little pin up in the top right, or you can use a keyboard shortcut P. So P to pin and P to unpin. We don't need to pin the subnodes because all of the subnodes are connected to the agent. So when we're using agents, we only need to pin the main node. So that is that data pinned. So what does that mean? Well, it means that when we execute the workflow again, we don't need to send another message in Telegram because it's using the last one. We don't need to run our agent again because it's already using the data from the previous execution. So now all we need to do is test that the last part is working, which is our text message back to Telegram. So that's a really important concept which you need to understand, because when you start building production grade workflows, you don't want to be running a full automation again. If something way downstream isn't quite working right, what you can do is you can pin everything upstream so everything's set, and when you run the execution, it's only going to fire for the nodes which aren't pinned. Click into your Telegram send a text message node. Now we've got some things that we need to configure here. So chat ID, well, you should remember this from when we were updating the simple memory. But the problem is, we now don't see chat ID anymore in the output of our AI agent. So there's two ways that we could deal with this. We could add to the system prompt that we want our AI agent to always output the chat ID, but the problem with that is, what if we don't want it to actually do that, right? There's a much simpler way which we can do it. So where it says input here, you can see where it says AI agent, and we can click on this drop down. And you see how the AI agent is one node back, but we can also see our Telegram trigger, which was 2 nodes back. And if you were dealing with a big automation, you would have all of your nodes listed out here, right? So I want you to click on Telegram trigger, which was 2 nodes back. And now we can see that data which we need. So what do we need? We need chat ID. We've talked about variables and map data. So we're going to drag the chat ID into the chat ID box. And you can now see it again here, Telegram trigger, item JSON, message chat ID, result is that. Now we need to update the text. So this is what our AI agent actually outputted. So we go back to AI agent in the top left. And now we're going to drag this output. We're going to drag that down into text. And you can see result, it's got a huge amount of text there. If you want to see it, you can hit on the little square. That is going to pop it up in bigger format so you can see exactly what's happening there. So let's test this out. So we don't need to go back to Telegram and send another message. We don't need to run our agent again because the data is pinned. So all we need to do is execute the workflow. You can see that's gone green. So let's hop back into Telegram and see if that worked. We should now have this message in Telegram. So let's check. And there you go. Here's how AI is expected to affect the finance industry by 2030 and all that information. So that has us now configured our AI agent, and we can now talk to it from inside of Telegram. So let's test this out one more time from the top to make sure that everything is working as it should. So we need to go back into n8n and we need to unpin the data that's pinned, because we don't want this execution to use previous data. We want this to be live this time, pulling the data from Telegram, and running the workflow from top to bottom. So hit P on your keyboard or click into the node and unpin it in the top right. And now we can hit save and we can hit publish again. We need to make sure that the workflow is published, right? Because since the last execution, we've configured a new node, so that is not going to be live unless we hit publish, okay? So publish the workflow, and I'm just going to refresh this. And now we can head back over to Telegram. I'm going to say, can you tell me when humans expect to achieve artificial general intelligence, AGI, and is it expected to be within the next 2 years? So I'm going to send that off, and what should now happen is the workflow should run and we should receive our message back here in Telegram without having to mess around with anything. So let's try it. And there we go. Based on expert analysis and forecast, the majority of AI researchers and experts estimate AGI to be achieved sometime within the next 5 to 35 years. So everything is working as it should, and that is where we're going to be closing off part 4. So what have we actually got now? Well, we've actually got an AI agent, which is useful. It can search the web, it can create drafts in Gmail, it can upload files to Drive, and it's connected to Telegram so that we can chat with it from our phone. A quick reminder of why this is so important when you're building production grade workflows, either for yourself or for other people if you plan to get into the AI agency space. People want their workflows to start based on external events which occur outside of n8n. And the way that we do that is with webhooks. So that could be a new lead form being submitted on your website, or it could be a new lead being added to your CRM. It could be a voice agent, or it could just be a RAG agent. And people don't want to be inside of n8n talking to their agent via the chat window. So that is why webhooks are a key concept which you really need to understand. So as a quick look ahead to part 5, as promised earlier on in the series, we're going to be starting to build out on this GraphRag AI agent. Now, if you don't know what GraphRag is, do not worry. I'm going to explain all of that in part 5 in detail. But this is what we're going to be building, which you see on screen. Now, why have we chosen this? Well, the reason is a lot of the n8n Masterclass series that you see on YouTube teach you how to build a number of different agents and automations which actually have no real world value. People are no longer wanting basic chatbots and basic automations. You need to be able to build real solutions which solve problems. And that is what this GraphRag AI agent does. And that is why you can sell this for a premium to businesses. Thousands of dollars these GraphRag agents can sell for. So you're going to be building this out over the next number of different episodes. We're not going to get all of this done in part 5, but we're going to get the RAG set up and we're going to really explain the concept of RAG so that you can see why it's so valuable. So that is everything for this episode. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you back here for part 5.